Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this ADL Initiative technical webinar today. At the ADL Initiative, we understand that collaboration is an important aspect of our community. So every now and then we organize webinars to share information on these important learning subjects. Today's focus is the Department of Defense DevSecOps Reference Design and its intersection with the Learning Technology Warehouse. We're joined today by the DoD's Chief Software Officer, Mr. Jason Weiss, the ADL Initiative RD&E Principal, Mr. Brent Smith, and Chief Strategy Officer for Float, Mr. Chad Udell.
Hey, thanks, Liz. I'm just going to cut to the chase. We're real fortunate today to have Mr. Jason Weiss with us today. He brings over 20 years of commercial experience doing IT reform, digital transformation, software modernization. Quite a lot of experience that we're fortunate to have in front of us today, as well with Chad Udell and the Float team. They've been doing a lot of work for us on this Learning Technology Warehouse. If you've attended previous webinars, you may have heard us talk about the DevSecOps Reference Design that the DoD CIO's office released months ago now. Back then, we were talking about version 1. More recently, now Jason's team has released this DevSecOps Reference Design 2.1. So it's pretty neat. It opens up a lot of options. There are certain efficiencies that can be gained by looking at things through multiple CI/CD pipelines. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get a little bit nerdy and talk about how we're actually implementing the vision that Dr. Schatz and the government leads here at the ADL Initiative have. And more importantly, how we're conforming that vision under the constraints and the strategic guidance of the Department of Defense, using certain initiatives like identity, credentialing, and access management, ICAM, Zero Trust, and other initiatives that are going on that are defense-wide that the training and education community has to conform to. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Weiss. Jason?
Hey, thank you, Brent. I appreciate that. As Brent said in the introduction, I think it's time for us to recognize that we can really no longer talk about living in the software-defined world, because we do live in a software-defined world. Everywhere around us, we see technology that is touched by software, whether it's the cars that we drive, whether it's the appliances that are in our kitchen, whether it's the infrastructure around us. Software is pervasive in our society at this point. We have reached that point where if we want new capabilities, we develop new software. Yes, hardware is still there, hardware is still important, but a lot of the technologies that we're seeing today are truly being software defined, from software defined radios through software defined perimeters. The software defined aspect is being leveraged to allow technology to move at a faster clip. And here in the DoD in particular, we see this need to respond to emerging threats. And so naturally, when we think about that and we think about how we're going to enable innovation to respond to those emerging threats, software comes to mind. And that's really the focus of the DevSecOps reference designs and the strategy behind DevSecOps here at the Department of Defense. The challenge that we face in many cases is that historically software has taken too long, it has been too expensive, and it's had too many times where we went down this long drawn-out path only to unfortunately fail. And so the goal here is to figure out how we can accelerate not only the delivery of software in a software-defined world through reference designs and the technologies associated with that, but to do it with a degree of cyber resiliency and to raise the bar on cybersecurity. And so that's really what sets the stage for what we're talking about here today. And so two of the terms that we often hear people associate with this is DevOps and DevSecOps. And what I think is of value for us is to actually baseline what these terms mean. So what I've done is I've grabbed a couple of Gartner definitions here, and there's some highlights here of the key words that I really wanted to emphasize, right? So DevOps was this recognition that there has to be more collaboration between operations and development. We've all seen the memes and the jokes, right? Well, it worked fine in dev. That isn't going to cut it going forward. And one technology, one approach to technology readiness and to making sure that it works in development equally well as it does in production is through the adoption of automation tools. The more that we automate, the more we can manage what's known as drift, right? The difference between the development environment and the production environment. What we began to see as the cyber threat scenarios around us continued to mature and evolve was that we couldn't just focus on the operations and the developments part. We also had to integrate security professionals and the security techniques and all of the cybersecurity management aspects of both the development software factory, which is a production ecosystem, and the production system itself, right? And to do that as seamlessly and transparently as possible. And so that's really the baseline definition by Gartner of the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps, is this integration such that security is pervasive through every aspect of that ecosystem. And so if we were to take these definitions and look big picture across the DoD, the software modernization strategy at the DoD recognized DevSecOps and its associated tooling on the left-hand side as a technical enabler. And I think this chart is particularly poignant because it emphasizes that DevSecOps is one part of a modernization strategy. It is a critical part, but it's not the only part. It's part of the technical enablers pillar, but we also have to deal with process transformation if we're going to get the outcomes on the right-hand side for the warfighter. Those outcomes range from everything from faster software to help them deliver their mission capabilities, and I like to add on and return home, because that's really what we want our warfighters to do, is to come back to us and to their families and their friends, not just execute the mission. And then also on the process side, we need to recognize that survivability column, right? The cyber survivability is going to be important. So while we do seek to move faster and to get software out there at the speed of relevance, we need to recognize that we still have this opportunity to bake in cybersecurity and to make it secure at speed. Underlying all of this is the tech force multipliers, where you see things like data and AI and ML. And anybody that's heard me talk has heard me say this before, right? The software applications that we build generate the data and the APIs to get at those data. That data and all of the modeling around AI and ML is key. If you don't have the data, then you can't create the AI and ML models. The AI and ML models are just models until they're actually embedded back into the software application, which brings us full circle. So this idea of data, AI, and ML and the DevSecOps software factory construct, they are three legs of a stool. If you take away any one of those legs, the stool becomes unbalanced. So all three of them need to coexist. And that's just one example of many off of this slide. So how do we visualize DevSecOps? What does it look like when we talk about it? Well, the most common way to visualize DevSecOps is through the infinity diagram. And what I wanted to highlight here was the intentional choice of putting all of these notional security tests on the outside. They are not representative of a complete list of all of the types of security tests that could take place, but it's really to drive home that security is so integrated into the fabric of the DevSecOps ecosystem that it's touching everywhere on the perimeter. You can't go anywhere without being protected on that infinity diagram, whether you're in a planning stage and you're doing a threat modeling exercise, or whether you're doing a digital signature as part of releasing your code or a pen test. Everywhere you turn, there are one or more different security aspects that touch that infinity diagram. And so if we were to drill into that, if we were to actually double click on this infinity diagram and ask, well, what does that software factory underneath it look like? The way the DevSecOps reference designs articulate a software factory is that it's a multi-tenant construct. And there are multiple CI/CD pipelines running within a particular software factory. And what I wanted to highlight on this particular slide were the control gates. So those control gates represent where those cybersecurity checks are going to take place as the software moves through the pipeline, as it transits from the dev environment through the CI/CD pipeline into test, into integration, and then finally ultimately being released for continuous delivery. And what is particularly important about those control gates is that our goal is to automate as much as possible on those control gates, but to recognize that there's still a human in the loop in some cases. That doesn't necessarily mean that it will be 100% automated. That's something to strive for in more advanced DevSecOps teams, especially in commercial industry, do achieve that. And they truly have continuous delivery where it goes through all the way into production, fully automated. In weapon systems, there could still be a human in the loop, and that's important for the DoD as we start thinking about risk contexts and whether this particular component being used in an application is suitable for environment A versus environment B, and how we may want to mitigate the risks from, say, a threat modeling exercise against that component. And so that's really the value of the DevSecOps reference design, is that it provides this construct for teams that says these are the things that you need to think about, and these are the things that you need to work on if you're going to build out a DevSecOps software factory. And so the way that the 2.1 construct is set up is through these things that we call reference design interconnects. And the interconnects are really intended to be like the puzzle pieces, right? These are the implementations of the reference design where they bring the rubber to hit the road, if you will. It's where we actually indicate how we're going to achieve everything from a zero trust foundation to continuous monitoring to even something like user and event behavior monitoring during the execution of the application. And so in the reference design that you see here for CNCF Kubernetes, this reference design calls out the CNAP at the base level there for us, and we have obviously a CNCF certified Kubernetes, and then we layer on top of that additional security mechanisms and additional security capabilities. And so the parting thought that I wanted to offer to the folks attending the webinar today is that when we think about DevSecOps, we need to think about it and recognize that it is helping to advance our cybersecurity posture. It does this through three key areas. It sets us up for success in defensive cyber operations so that if we need to change our threat posture based on the threats around us, we can rapidly push out a patch and have confidence that that patch isn't going to bring a production system to its knees. It offers us the constructs for continuous monitoring, and it gives us the ability to understand and to dig deeper into our secure software supply chain. And so the final thought that I'd like to share with everybody today before I hand it back over to Brent is that always remember security is not mutually exclusive with speed. It's still hard to accommodate and to be both cyber secure and to move at the speed of relevance, but they're not mutually exclusive. And so with that, I'd like to turn the mic back over to Brent.
Thanks, Jason. That's awesome. So yeah, everything that Jason just talked about is kind of the life that we're living right now. We're working to conform to a lot of the guidance that his office has put out. I think I should probably start by talking a little bit about our domain. And for anyone who is new to the ADL initiative, I'll just talk about who we are and where we sit. We are recently realigned underneath the Defense Human Resources activity, specifically under the DSSC, the Defense Support Services Center. But we also have coordination responsibility with the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness, Mr. Constable, and the DASD, Force Education and Training. Mr. Constable, I believe, is the Deputy ASD for Readiness, so I should point that out. What that essentially means is that we have to interface with a lot of different systems across the human capital supply chain, the DoD's human capital supply chain, across different services and different DoD organizations at what people typically call the fourth estate. But we also have to deal with, and those often deal with like the traditional educational institutions, the Army Chem School, Professional Military Education, Defense Acquisition University. But we also are working to coordinate with a lot of the training side of the force that goes on to support readiness under the Force Education and Training Office. That's different simulator systems, multinational exercises, and whatnot. The whole goal is to be able to collect performance information about learners from all those different systems. This is a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today, but I'm just going to kind of blow through it because I think this is important. When you think about your learning within the military, any one of us who has worked with the military can probably respect the fact that your learner data is stored in a number of different databases. You encounter a lot of different, oftentimes disconnected training applications, learning management systems, training management systems, simulator systems, on-the-job training, performance support tools, and a lot of other types of systems that you use in your day-to-day jobs that just help you do business. They're digital systems. And right now they're very disconnected, and there is no real easy way to share all the data that comes out of those systems so that other systems can use that data. And so what we're moving towards is more of a data streaming kind of architecture, where kind of when we talk about what what Jason talked about earlier about those technology enablers like AI and machine learning, right? One of the things that we're trying to do is start to catalog all the data about training and education, about learners, about our learning activities and learning resources that we have available, about the things that we're going to teach, the different competencies that are required to meet mission objectives in the operational side of the force. And once we have all that and we kind of start to define how those things are described and defined, other systems can use that information as well. I would say that if you are interested in learning more about the underlying architecture, that is something we call the total learning architecture. You can download these things, pause the video, and go ahead and find these on our website. You can also just go ahead and do searches on our website. But there's a lot of good information out there that talks about the underlying data models and this whole federated approach to data that we're looking to put forward here. All of this falls underneath a program called Enterprise Digital Learning Modernization. We'll be talking about that a lot at ITSEC. There's also webinars and a lot of resources on the ADL website that talks about EDLM and its overall goals. Really, this is everything that Jason just talked about in looking at how do we modernize the way that we train and educate our personnel. The reality is that people will go from Air Force to becoming a DoD subcontractor, and then they move back into government and they're a civilian GS employee. And so people kind of go back and forth and work for different services. And so it makes sense to be able to create this ledger of lifelong learning. And to do that, we need to rethink how we deploy software, because speed is an important factor in catching up to the evolving tactics, techniques, and procedures that are constantly changing out there in the operational environment. So one of the major lines of effort under EDLM is this concept of a DoD Learning Enclave. It's no longer conceptual because we're actually putting this into practice. We're currently building out our initial operational capability through the Air Force Platform 1 DevSecOps pipeline. And again, this was the reason we did this was to expedite so that we can get in there and start doing a lot of operational testing. So as I kind of try to decipher this slide for you, what I'm mainly trying to show here is that we look at having an entire, authorized environment running in, IL 2, 4, 5, 6, whatever's needed at the end of the day when we get to FOC, where different DoD stakeholders, the chem school, the Army, or different organizations can come in and deploy a bunch of these learning applications that are, one, conformant to the different standards that are part of the total learning architecture, so that we can describe those learning activities appropriately, we can track learner performance out of those learning activities appropriately. And then once we have all those different activities that are approved for use, that are compliant, they meet all the 508 requirements, they meet all the other IT requirements, they're accredited and secure, they create that body of evidence that's needed. Those would be available to run and to select from using the Learning Technology Warehouse. Think of it as, we called it the Learning Technology Warehouse. Initially, we were thinking of calling it an app store, but it's really not about just being able to look at the apps. We want to be able to go into kind of like the Costco for training and education, where you're seeing all these containers and you can kind of pick and choose and do evaluations between which learning management system do I want, which LRS is the best for my needs. What if I need mobile learning or adaptive instructional systems or just some utilities and scripts? So the whole goal is that while software deployed to the LTW can readily be available inside of the DoD Learning Enclave, just like is kind of the vision of what Platform 1 talks about, you should also be able to use these containers and run them on-prem embedded systems on your local DoD networks as well. A good example of that is the learner records store. We see that as being as common as an IP address. You may have them strapped to the back of your Humvee for your embedded training or your onboard simulator system or your mobile learning applications. And you should be able to download those, have it accredited. Eventually, that's something that we think should be available in Iron Bank as a container so that people can pick and choose which LRS do we want, and then how do we get it embedded into our system. So this is really kind of when Dr. Schatz and Dr. Milham and Dr. Cooper talk about creating this future learning ecosystem. It's really trying to create a plug and play architecture where all these different systems can be deployed in a moment's notice. So for our IOC, we're actually working to push 10 different systems through Platform 1. We will get certificates to field for IL4 environments. And you'll see here there's a mix of enterprise systems, data management services, the LTW, and then a bunch of different learning activities. The goal in this year of work is to get everything kind of accredited and running inside of the IL4 environment so that we can support operational testing with a bunch of our stakeholders. We already have sandboxes for DAU and the Army Steeler program, and we work with My Navy Learning, who has their own sandbox. But this, for the USASOC folks, we'll be standing this up inside the IL4 environment as well. It's important to be able to have sandboxes inside a secure environment too, so that we can do a lot of the operational testing and allow people to kind of use the tools that we're creating in this ecosystem here. This is a list of the different systems that we're actually accrediting and getting the certificates to field for. One of the things that we're looking to do over the next few weeks is to set up kind of an IPT as we're moving forward here. I think it's very important that as we go forward that we try to work with folks to achieve reciprocity as best we can. We do a lot of work with the Defense Acquisition University. They are doing some amazing things in their modernization efforts, and they are actually kind of doing a lot of groundwork and some cutting edge research in instrumenting Alexa with XAPI or Drupal and a bunch of other systems. Boy, what a great pipeline, a feeder pipeline to take some of their research and development investments and harden it and put it and make it available to others via the Learning Technology Warehouse. All of this very much resembles what Jason was talking about, this concept of a software factory. When you think about the 10 applications that we're putting in through the DLE IOC right now, it truly is the tip of the iceberg. There are thousands and thousands of learning tools and technologies that are in play today across the Department of Defense. And this whole initiative started through a reform management group, gosh, four years ago or so, as they did an evaluation of the different business systems that are used for training and education, and found that there are hundreds of different LMSs licensed at different licensing costs for the same LMS, depending on users and whatnot. And it was truly the Wild West. And so this is one way of trying to get our hands around that and start to commonize the way that we're doing things, with the recognition that, one, eventually we're going to be putting more than just open source tools and technologies in the DLE or the LTW. How do we coordinate with industry to make sure that our software factory has synergies with the way that they manage and update their software so that it can be deployed and available and whatnot? So these are all non-trivial challenges that we face moving forward. As we talked about, our initial operational capability is going through Platform 1, and they provide a lot of services, a lot of overhead. And they make it pretty easy when you get in there to break things down. I know some of our engineers are probably looking at me shaking their head, but it's true. Most of the work that we do is not as challenging from a technical perspective as it is from a cultural perspective, and they take care of so much of the overhead. These things like their Istio service mesh handles all the east-west traffic, and we don't have to worry about all that as much. The sidecar container security stack is amazing. It sits outside our containers and monitors all the traffic going in and out so that it supports their continuous monitoring services that they have for a lot of the things that are going on there. And that just buys down a ton of risk for us and helps expedite, because now we don't have to worry about some of those things. Those are common components that are going to be needed across every service. And so the fact that DoD is starting to think about how can we build out these common components, common containers like those that are stored in Iron Bank, is really refreshing, because it really is taking an enterprise strategic look at how do we build software? What are the basic building blocks that we use over and over and over again? One of the products that we have going forward is this enterprise course catalog. That's going to be out for operational testing this year. And you can kind of see how there's a lot of different components. It's a little bit more complex than some of the software products that we're finding inside of Platform One, but it fits. We've made it work with very minimal issues, consolidating some services and things along those lines, but nothing huge. We already had a fairly good CI/CD pipeline with the ECC. And if any of you attended the August DevSecOps Community of Practice for the DoD, you may have seen a demo of that where we were able to do the one-button deployment into Azure and into Amazon Web Services. So that's that's neat stuff. The fact that we can do that, and that's kind of the goal that we have for the LTW, is to be able to have different deployment scripts, so that if you want to run yours in an Azure environment, here's the scripts, here's how you deploy it. If you want to run it in Amazon, you can do the same. If you want to run it wherever. That's also a lot of the work that's going on with the DoD Cloud IAC team right now, is looking at those CSP native tools that can do a lot of these same things. So a lot of good movement, a lot of reuse opportunities that the DoD in general is providing our community as we go forward here. This is really just a listing of the major tasks that we're working through to get. We've got a bunch of the repos already set up, ECC. We're using the SQL LRS. It's an open source LRS that's been provided by Yet Analytics. It's pretty amazing. I would urge you to check it out. It's available open source out there. It's a fully functional LRS. They've kind of got some adapters that they can hook it into Tableau or click to learn and some of these other business analytics tools, but it's just a quick way of getting things up and running. There's other LRSs that we'll be looking at in the future. Certainly, we have Veracity running in our sandbox. The Air Force already has Learning Locker running in an IL4 environment. And so as time goes on, we hope to have a number of different solutions in there that people can pick and choose from depending on what their needs are. That way we can adapt those building blocks to the learning solutions that are being built by our stakeholders here. So this is all stuff that we have planned to do over the next year. I would even say the next 10 months. The big thing here is when you see the stars, that's when we're talking about having initial use. And so that's after we get it in there, get it running, get all the features all integrated. It's hooked through the DevSecOps pipeline, the Party Bus pipeline, and it has a certificate to field, and it's running and in the IL4 environment inside of Party Bus. This also aligns very well with our 5-year plan that we've built out. And this is a snapshot straight from that, just to talk about, here's all the things we're talking about doing. Getting our initial operational capabilities for ECC and ELRR and CAS and other things. So this was a big expediter for us. The DLE previously was being managed through OPM and through USA Learning. And it wasn't moving as quickly as some folks in DoD would like. So now we're on the hook to do a lot of the work with our team, the ADL SETA team, and the vendors that work for us. And so there's a lot, we're learning a lot as we go along, but in a way that's better, because now we get the hands-on experience about what do we need to do when we move over to FOC. So I'm rushing through this. I'll be quick here. These are some of the things that we're considering for our full operational capability. To date, we've had a really good working relationship with Dave and HC over at the Cloud Computing Program Office. They have been working this DoD Cloud IAC program, Infrastructure as Code, and they have a GitHub out there that has a bunch of CSP native tools and scripts and deployment scripts that you can use to deploy your systems into Amazon or Azure. I think they're working on a Google deploy, a bunch of scripts. They also received a provisional ATO for their Azure environment, I think. It might have been Amazon. You'd have to double check, don't quote me. But the point is that they're moving forward and they're getting provisional ATOs, and that provides some options to different folks. The DevSecOps Reference Design 2.1 was largely based around that work. When I read it, that's my take anyway. No one's ever told me that, but it sure looks familiar. And that's important for us. You heard Jason say earlier that with a software factory, you really want to have this collection of CI/CD pipelines. And I think that's important. we were talking earlier today about right now with Platform One, it's working. It's a great way to expedite and get in there for operational testing. But even the Platform One team says, Party Bus is really a way of getting your feet wet and getting you experienced and building that culture up, right? It's not always just the technology, it's about building the mindset of our people. And Party Bus helps us do that. But everyone's been very clear that we're going to want to move over and either set up our own big bang pipelines or some other form of DevSecOps pipeline. It might be a combination of big bang tools and DoD Cloud IAC tools. And what that does is it allows us to tailor the pipelines to the software instead of having to cram the software into the pipeline. Party Bus is very opinionated. It's a very templated pipeline. There's no wiggle room. And that's because it's attached to their continuous ATO. And I think that's probably important. They have to lock it down. One of the things that Jason did talk about that I thought was important to note was about with multiple CI/CD pipelines is you have these control gates and you want to automate as much of that as possible, but you also have to have human in the loop. Those are some of the reciprocity areas that we're going to be looking at. And we're trying to put together this whole team so that we can look at, here's the body of evidence that we're creating at each of these control gates. Does this meet your needs, DAU IT folks? Does this meet your needs, NETC or AETC or ADIS, Army University IT folks? And as we're able to kind of make sure that we're having those coordinated conversations, our hope is that we can build up more reciprocity so that by, we build it once, we accredit it once, and we deploy often. We have a ways to go to get there, but I think we're on track to do some great things with the IOC and really get kind of work the kinks out of the pipeline, if you will, just to make sure that we have the water flowing through, and getting that IOC out is going to be a really important first step. That last bullet here is important because it isn't as much about the tech as it is about the mindset. Regardless of how we go forward, we need to start building out a lot of the cybersecurity artifacts that are required. We're going to have to do a set of those for our IOC through Platform One. But Platform One already has their ATO, and they've already authorized their DevSecOps pipelines. And they've already authorized their teams to manage those pipelines and to manage their environments. So for us, as we move over to our FOC, we want to be prepared. If we have to set up our own big bang implementation, we know we have to bring our own ATO. We've been coordinating with DISA and with our own home office through DHRA, DSSC, to figure out what are those analysis of alternatives. What does it mean if we go with DISA? What does it mean if we go with the MDC? Mostly, the process is going to be the same. We're going to have the same, definitely the same types of documents, but we might have different risk thresholds between the different authorizing officials and whatnot. So having those conversations early, we can start to figure out where the pain points are. If the work we're doing through Party Bus and through Platform One, hits 85–90% of the risk tolerances and the body of evidence required by the authorizing officials, then that's great, because now we only need to focus on that remaining 10–15% to do what we need to do to get them the right body of evidence that gives them the warm and comfy feeling that our products are secure. And let's be clear, everyone on our team wants to make sure that our products are secure. This is not a time to take shortcuts, but this is a time to kind of think about how to do this right. We're putting everything in place here. So if you have ideas and thoughts on what we can do to make this better, if there's things that we're not thinking about or that we haven't talked about today, please reach out to me. We are sponges in this space, and we are trying to get as smart as we can on this. And above all, we're trying to do this thoughtfully and right, so that as we move forward here, we build a value-added service to everybody that's on the call here for whenever they do their training and education. With that, kind of what does the future have to hold for us? I'm going to pass a lot of this over to Chad. Chad's been a joy to work with. They work our Pearls platform. It's one of our mobile learning applications. And they're also working with QIC, is a really innovative company located here in Orlando that has kind of been putting this whole LTW concept together. And Jen, who was initially involved with this work, came from the research and development world. And that was one of the big things that we were trying to figure out, is how can we, as an organization, build these relationships with the Navy Tech Bridge and with Air Force Airworks and the Army research folks, so that we can take all the different DoD investments that are being made into training and education tools and technologies and slowly build this pipeline so that we're not just taking them and deploying them to the services, but that we take those investments and we push them up here and we make them available to everybody else within the department, so that if the Army wants to use something like MERTS that the Navy's been developing for 5 years, boy, here it is. You can download it, you can run it, it's already accredited, you can put it in on your networks. I think that's the goal where we want to go, and we have a long way to get there. But Chad, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to close my mouth.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate the warming the plate and getting things set up here in order to hopefully give a nice demonstration of the ADL Learning Technology Warehouse. As stated previously, the entirety of the product here that we're taking a look at is both a product that is developed using DevSecOps processes at its core. It is containerized software running in a cloud environment that has been subjected to continuous test, review, feedback, and iterative deployment over an agile development process, but it is also a home to other software products developed using that same type of process. The pipelines may be different depending on the environments that the software is to be hosted in, or depending on the type of software that it is. There are some applications here that are server-side based. There are some applications here that are also mobile application designed, optimized as native applications for iOS and Android. This application here, the ADL Learning Technology Warehouse, available at apps.usalearning.net. You can access it today. If you'd like to get a named account on that, you can sign up at the website. We do have an automated approval process for .gov.mil email addresses, but we see all the requests that come in. So if you are working on a project related to ADL or in conjunction with ADL and you don't have that same sort of email address, we can get you into that as well. Just as a side note, I will be at ITSEC spending some time in the ADL booth. So if you would like to learn more about the LTW or how to gain access to it or how to get your applications on there, certainly please reach out. I know that Brent would be very heartened to get a couple more products in here as well. So we definitely want to be hearing from the community at large. I see a few folks listed in the attendee list here that definitely have some interest and have some products probably of their own as well. So absolutely would love to get better representation of all of the new modern TLA applications and services that are out there. The application here that we're looking at is a website built on top of the open source content management system Drupal, which is one of the world's most widely distributed and actively supported content management systems. So it seems to be a good home for building a platform on top of it. It's actively secured. It's got bulletins and updates that come out regularly for it, as well as a highly modular system. So adding new capabilities is a lot easier than having to write things from scratch. It basically handles so much of the create, read, update, delete type of functionality that is necessary in a modern web application, as well as connects into identity providers and a variety of other things that make it an attractive piece of enterprise technology. So as we look at this, it is intended to function as an app store. So it is a directory of applications that reside inside of it, as well as intended eventually to have research and editorial content related to how to create a learning ecosystem under the TLA. So recipes could be shared and a variety of other types of pieces of content as well. We're looking here at the dashboard, which is a listing of the products that are currently hosted in it. It is a small catalog at this point. Like I said, we're just getting started. But we do happen to have a variety of good ones that have been produced over the most recent period of time by ADL and its associate partners. Pearls, the application that I'm going to show you here, the listing page for today, is also a piece of containerized software built using DevSecOps. It's deployed using Docker, and there is a mobile application component that is developed using the Xamarin toolkit from Microsoft. And the source code will be open sourced here very shortly as well for all of this. When we take a look at a listing for a product in the app ADL Learning Technology Warehouse, you'll see that we have an overview for the product, that icon nice and bold, basic metadata of what the product actually is, image and video galleries that give the viewer an idea of what they can expect when they're using that particular application. If there are any appropriate integrations or required dependencies that might be necessary. If there are research publications available that back up or provide more details on this product and its origination, of course, the documentation must live there. If there is a contact at ADL or other vendor there, as well as links to the project page at adlnet.gov. The update history and then, of course, frequently asked questions are also available. There's both frequently asked questions for the products discretely, but also for the overall site. And the real area that this actually shines, though, is this application here is available as a web-based demo. If you would like to launch that demo from here, you can actually click that launch button. It provides you a very simple username and password that just gets you in for basic learner access. And these systems are regularly cleaned. Because they are containerized software, we can easily reset them to a clean and secure state. And we can also make sure that no one is running rampant or exhibiting bad behavior in those systems as well. I'm not going to launch the demo for the Pearls. I think that's probably a different webinar at some point here for ADL. So we'll leave that to yourselves as you review the USA Learning website, the apps.USA Learning website itself. But I think what I wanted to show you next, before I turn it back over for Q&A, is the tenant management portion of the website. So getting back to Jason's original point, this really is intended to be an environment that has multiple tenants, that is intended to run very easily and seamlessly to get new tenants up and running, and also to be able to maintain, clear, patch, and do all the types of DevOps activities that you need in order to have good running SaaS-like software. So from this dashboard in the tenants for Pearls, I can see the currently running tenants in this environment, this enclave. I can update them if there is a patch or an update available. It's a one-click update process that pulls from the CI pipeline in order to deploy that. And then also I can even delete those. I'm not going to, because we do have some users inside of those tenants and I think they'd probably be unhappy if I deleted them. But we also have the ability to create a new tenant directly from inside of this environment. This screen here will just take one quick second. Pulls up a workflow that has the required fields necessary to create a new instance of Pearls inside of this enclave. Literally within minutes of hitting the submit button, I'll get a nice little bulletin or an announcement telling me that my version of Pearls is ready, and then my learners can get up and running as quickly as that. The other thing that's pretty cool about this is we do keep a version history of all of the versions of that product. So if you want to see either how the product has been updated or been maintained, you can certainly do that. Or if you have legacy devices that can only connect to certain types of instances because, say, for example, new capabilities have been added in 2.8 that are no longer supported in older devices or something like that, you can restrict the deployment based off of those types of criteria as well. And this tenant then, once it would be created, would just simply show up directly in this list. Now that's firing off scripts for AWS, but I think Brent had made mention during his presentation that we want to get to a place where those deployment scripts are agnostic and can be created for multiple different cloud instance providers or infrastructure providers rather. So that's it right now for the ADL Learning Technology Warehouse. Like I said, we're just getting started. We're very excited to have the products in that we do, and we're looking to have more products in there very shortly. So if you are interested in getting access to this, please go to apps.usalearning.net and sign up. And also, if you're interested and you have a TLA product that you would like to have featured in the ADL Learning Technology Warehouse, please reach out to Brent Smith or myself at ITSEC. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the folks at ADL, to Liz and to Brent for Q&A. So thank you.
Thanks, Chad, and thanks, Jason.
Hey, Brent, we did have one. Where is the data lake going to exist? Submitted from Gerald Hirsch.
Gotcha. So what we're doing is, if you remember the enterprise systems that we had up there, the Enterprise Learner Record Repository, the Enterprise Course Catalog, and the Global Competency Registry. Those are three of our main data pillars. XAPI is kind of our other data pillar, and that's more of the transport that takes your raw learner performance data, rolls it up to the other systems there. So they will reside at the enterprise level of the DoD Learning Enclave. Those are going to be, the global systems are actually going to be put into a graph model because they're all intertwined and interrelated, nodes and links. Whereas a lot of the open source tools that we're going to be pushing out that are available to the different DoD customers through Iron Bank and whatnot, will be able to use either a relational database or a graph database, depending on what suits their own needs. But for the global systems, they'll be running inside of a graph model that sits inside the DoD Learning Enclave, or wherever the system owners are for ELRR, ECC, and the Global Competency Registry.
And Brent, we had another question, and I think you had touched on this. What cloud is this going to be in initially? And I believe you had indicated that it was starting in AWS, and then you hoped to have scripts for other clouds as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the DLE will likely is residing in Amazon Web Services, at least for the IOC. I suspect that we'll probably move forward and just keep that, just so we don't have to re-engineer everything. As time goes on, I think there's discussions to be had on whether, a mixed cloud environment makes sense for certain things. Certainly for the different tools, the learning activities, platforms, systems that reside in the LTW, we want to make those available for whatever environment our stakeholders need them in. So something like a Moodle learning management system, we should be able to deploy that into Amazon or Azure or whatever other cloud hosting solution is determined, whether it's on-prem or embedded or otherwise.
Got it. Great. So we had another question here from Graham Provost. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Are there any learner progression / adaptive personalization applications in the LTW?
So we're getting there. One of the big focus areas that we've had over the past couple of years is to build out that data foundation. So working through IEEE Learning Technology Standards Committee to define and to build out the standards. We want to do that with the community. It's not just ADL saying, oh, here's your standards. No, we want to work with the community so that the developers have buy-in, that the academic institutions have buy-in, and that others are all kind of set there. The way standards are working these days is you have core and profiles. That's kind of the way XAPI works. That's the way that we expect that the standard for learning metadata, IEEE P2881, are going to work. And so we've been very much focused on getting all that data squared away so that we can create a level playing field for all the different adaptive instructional systems that are out there. That being said, the Pearls platform that Chad briefly showed in the LTW does use adaptation in the way that it delivers content. It may not be the truest form of adaptation because it's using a limited set of the data there, but it is an extensible platform that can use more robust adaptation as that data becomes available. One of the things that we had to be careful with as we were building out this whole total learning architecture was that the DoD has spent bazillions of dollars on legacy systems, legacy training content, legacy courses, simulation scenarios and whatnot. And many of those systems are not instrumented to work with this future learning ecosystem or work with the TLA. But we've built a bunch of adapters and a bunch of migration strategies. We have a capability maturity model that allows organizations to look at their own networks and their own organization to look at, do we have the right vision? Do we have the right communication protocols? Do we have the right acquisition guidance? Are we looking at the right technology? And it allows you to do kind of an assessment of your current state to find your as is, and then allows you to figure out where do I want to apply resources to reach that to be that goal of true interoperability that the TLA kind of paints the opportunity for. So that's a long-winded way of saying that we have very little adaptive instructional systems in there right now. We've been pushing a lot of documents and publications out through HCII and ITSEC and other places on the value of the TLA data for analytics and adaptation. A little plug for our ITSEC paper that we wrote with John Turner, the senior advisor to David Spurk, one of the DoD's chief data officers. We're going to be putting on a CDO roundtable at ITSEC on that Tuesday because I think the training and education community is an untapped resource. It's not as sensitive as some of the weapons systems that are going to be required for some of these bigger programs like JADC2. But there is a whole human capital element that can be encapsulated in here. And so it can buy down a lot of risk to support the DoD data strategy using these less sensitive data sets that are available within training and education. There's still a lot of privacy information and op security and whatnot, and that's why we're pushing everything into the IL4 environment. But I think once we get our hands around the data, then we'll have a good understanding of how to build up a lot of those different adaptive systems. I hope I answered your question there.
Yes, it looks like you did. I got a great answer in the chat for you there, Brent. So the next question is, any thoughts of collaborating with open metadata initiatives such as the Linux Foundation with Ageria? I'm not sure how to pronounce that library.
So I would have to defer to Andy Johnson. He's our specifications and standard manager, and he's also the chair of the IEEE P2881 working group that's putting together that standard for learning metadata. We have done, I think, a pretty good job of coordinating with different standards organizations, and I know that group in particular has brought in a lot of different thoughts on other different metadata initiatives. Metadata is pretty ubiquitous these days. One of the things we did is we leveraged the work that was done by the T3 Innovation Network. They built something out that's available on GitHub if anyone's interested in looking at it. It's the Data Ecosystem Schema Mapper. And it's pretty cool. It aligns different standards to like the credential engines, learning opportunity profile, or to IMS global standards, or to the PESC, right? The Post-Secondary Education Standards Council for how they define content. And so we are looking at kind of that whole interpolation of, hey, these 6 metadata standards all have this same data element here, but they name them a little bit differently. What do we call them? You know, so that DESM is kind of it's just a way of creating that schema that kind of aligns between the different data standards that are out there. I don't know that the Ageria open metadata standard is included in that data set, but it is open source. And so that's certainly something that could be added at some point in time in the future. And that's another thing that I should point on. One of the pieces of software that we have inside the DLE is this linked data and schema server. Interpreting all the data is equally as important as collecting the data. So I often use the term data farming versus data mining, because using XAPI, we want to plant the seeds of data that we're going to collect and grow into meaningful information that end users can use to visualize. If you're collecting all the data that's generated, that becomes a lot of noise over time. And so we want to be targeted in how we do that. We want to always have access to the source data, like the raw data, right? And that also respects data ownership and data stewardship. So what we're really kind of building out here is a federated system to be able to link all these different buckets of learner data together across a continuum of learning.
Great. Another question here. What is the status of the enterprise course catalog?
So we got our base prototype that was delivered. The MVP was delivered back in September, I believe. We did a big old demonstration and whatnot. We awarded the option year for that, and it's moving forward. They kicked that off back in September. It was a pretty seamless transition. We've already got the source code moved over to the Platform One repository. That is our highest priority. That's the first pipelines that are being stood up inside of Platform One. The goal is to have a initial deployment of those containers in the January to February timeframe. So that we'll be able to do that. If we go back to, I don't know if I have it in there. I actually don't have the schedule in there. We are going to be having 3 quarterly demonstrations of it. Each one will have more and more features and capabilities. But after the second release, that's when we'll be starting operational testing, bringing in live catalog data from Air Force and Navy and Defense Acquisition University. Joint Knowledge Online is another one of our stakeholders for that. So we'll be working to pull live catalog data from all of those different systems. And we're already doing that to an extent. So that schema server, the linked data and schema server, actually detects the header files inside of the local catalog database, and it interprets that data schema to the P2881 metadata, which is also the data model that drives the enterprise course catalog. And we store those schema conversions up there in the schema server. And then we can also kind of do fault tolerances and quality checks to make sure that it meets the required rules for what an IRI is going to hold by being able to link back to all the linked data there. So those constrained vocabularies also help with the interpretation of the data by other connected systems, because we're just passing IRIs around.
Great, thank you for that. At this time, I don't see any additional questions in the chat, Brent, so I will pass the mic back to you, so to speak.
Well, thank you. And thanks for moderating those. I would be curious if there's any other things that we should be thinking about as we move forward here. If you saw anything that, or if you didn't see anything that we ought to be considering. And that same holds true for Jason and Chad too. If there's things that ADL ought to be considering that we didn't talk about today, an acronym list for all of this. You know, we actually put together an acronym list. I don't know if it's on our website or where it might be, but there is one for the training and education community.
Okay, all right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, or the speakers have any final words to leave us with?
I would just foot stomp his last slide, Jason's last slide on speed and security are not necessarily codependent. We need speed, but we need to be secure. The world's changing too fast to not be thinking otherwise.
Indeed, and thank you for everybody's great dialogue and the questions today, and appreciate the participation.
Chad, anything from you before we leave?
Not at this time. Again, if you are interested in talking ADL, LTW, or Pearls, come see me at the ADL booth there at ITSEC.
All right, so before we wrap things up, I just want to say one more time, we talked about ITSEC a few times. The ADL initiative will be there at booth number 3154. And after ITSEC, we will be having another webinar. It will be on MADLAX this time, and you can learn more about the MADLAX project. I'm going to copy a link into the chat so you can see more about that. And today's webinar was recorded, and it will be available on our website at adlnet.gov/webinars at the end of the week. And thank you so much to all the speakers, and thank you to everyone who tuned in and asked questions. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.